Hey gang, so this is a quick tutorial on how to make a bar graph and scatter plot for your rocket project. So what I've done is I've taken the template that I've linked on your Canvas page. It's literally linked there as template, and I put it into Notability. So you'll see that there's instructions on the Canvas page in terms of how you want to label this stuff. So if we go back to Canvas, and let me go back to the home page. And we click back, and you'll see where I got the template here, right? So you'll see that for the bar graph, we're doing this on class average altitudes for each rocket for launches 1 and 2. We're just doing 1 today because that's the only data that we have. So rocket number is going to go on the x-axis, which is a horizontal one, and rocket altitude will go on the y-axis. So we go back to Notability, so we got rocket number, rocket altitude as our two variables. So we hit the, come on. And we're going to start writing it up. So we said rocket altitude was going to be on the y-axis and rocket number was going to be on the x-axis. So we come down here and we write rocket number. Now the rocket number means which number of the launch it was. So I think in period 3, which was my biggest class, we had 10 rockets or something like that. So rocket number 1 would go here. Rocket number 2 would go here. Number 3, number 4. And this is strictly the launch order that you were put into on the Canvas launch order list, right? So that's rocket number. That's all that means. So let's say rocket number 1 went a certain altitude. So we'll graph that shortly. The next thing is on the y-axis, it said we needed to put rocket altitude. Okay, now remember, when we do a graph, it is important to put your units on here. Altitude is measured in meters, so in parentheses, I'm going to put parentheses m. Now, we need to label our intervals here. So I think if I use my altitude, I'm going to do period 3 as an example. So if I get my paper for period 3, I'm going to be able to see what we had here. All right, so we ranged in altitude from period 3. And you can see this if you download the link on the Canvas page, if that applies to you. But our averages were anywhere from about 30 or 26 to roughly 80 meters, okay? So that's what our range is. So for that period, I need to go up to roughly 80 meters. I can just go up by tens here. So I'm going to start at 0, 10 meters, 20, 30, and I keep going, right? Now, I think my peak altitude in all classes, and I'm just doing this for a reference, right, was over 80, but not higher than 90. So if I go up to 100 meters, that's plenty, right? So next thing is if I'm looking at my data for, period 3, my first example is rocket number 1 ended up going an average of about 39 meters. So I just draw a little bar of almost 40 meters, right? And these bars do not need to be different colors. They can all be the same color, doesn't matter. But we're just making a simple bar graph to see how we did in terms of a class average for launch 1 for all the rockets in the class, right? So number 2 went to about 40 meters. So that went just a shade higher, so that goes up to here, right? And that's it. That's all you got to do. You just look at each launch number in terms of the class data that I've compiled for you on the Canvas page, and you just say who went where. Rocket number 3, which in my instance would be Carmen and Ava, they ended up going 45, right? So we get this bar graph that's just steadily going higher for this specific data I use. So you just need to go on to your data, okay, for whatever your period is for the altitude, and just put the average altitude for each of the rockets in that class, okay? If you only had 7 rockets in your class, you will only go to the 7th bar. You get the picture. It's quite simple. Now, don't forget to put a little title here, and the title is going to be rocket class average AVG altitudes, ALT. Okay, there you go. Rocket class average altitudes. And you can copy this and put this in where your graph is, where your graphs are located on Canvas, or excuse me, on your Google Doc. Now, let's say you're having technical difficulties pasting that in there. If you can't figure it out, I'll help you out on Monday, but at least get the graph done, okay? So then the next thing I'm going to show you how to do is a scatter plot. So what's a scatter plot, right? So I'm going to go, this is where we tie in altitude and time on our graph. So remember, you also do a pie chart. I'm not going to show you how to do that because if you just follow the direction on pages, it's quite simple. So now I'm going to go back to our Canvas page, and we're going to check out the directions for, wrong window, our scatter plot, which is under step 4, okay? So step 4 is create a scatter plot of line of best fit of altitude and time. Altitude will be on the y-axis, that's vertical. Time will be on the x-axis. So here we go. We go back to our template, and I'm going to line up time down here, okay? And that's in seconds. And then I'm going to line up altitude in meters up here. For brevity, I'm going to, I'll just put the whole thing. Okay, so now I'm going to do period 3 again, right? Since I got that data handy. You need the average altitude and the time to do this properly, okay? I'm not going to do this verbatim for the class because that's cheating, but I'll do a little bit to show you what a line of best fit is, okay? So first of all, we got to put our title. That's average altitude over time. And that's it, okay? So how do I do this? First of all, I need to label my increments. Time for my period 3 example is going to go no higher than about 8 seconds. So I don't need to go that high down here on the x-axis. So I start at the origin, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 seconds, okay? Altitude, again, I don't need to go any higher than 100 meters. So I'm going to go by 10, so 10, 20, 30, and so on, right? Now, the key of a line of best fit is it's a scatter plot, first of all. So you're showing where everybody hit in terms of a scattering of dots. And the line of best fit is over that scattering of dots. It's going to establish the basic trend of what your class data is doing here. So let's go ahead and take a look at the idea here. The idea is that as average time increases, you should have a higher altitude because that would indicate you're spending more time in the air. So if I look at rocket number 3, for example, rocket number 1, I'm sorry. Rocket number 1 had an average time of 2.1, actually I'd say it's about 5.1 seconds, and it also went about 39 meters. So for about 5.1 seconds, which is just a hair over 5, which is right here, okay, here's a little dotted line to show where I'm at. That rocket went about 39 meters. At the intercept of these lines is where I put my point, okay? Now, do you actually put these lines on your graph? No, that's not a line of best fit. That's just me showing you how I do this, okay? Now I'm going to go ahead and do another one. Rocket number 2. Rocket number 2, which was Alexa in autumn, ended up going about 40 meters, and it had a total of about 5.4-ish seconds, okay? So if I go 5.4, that's a little bit higher. And so 5.4 is right here in the middle. It went about 40 meters. There's your intercept, right? Now I'm going to skip to a random rocket down below. So I'm going to go rocket 10. Rocket 10 had an average altitude of 26 meters, and it had an average time of roughly about 4.4 seconds. 26 is roughly around there, right? 4.4 is roughly around here. So where those lines intersect, I put a point. Now, let's go to a higher one. What was my highest? My highest was number 6, and that had 80 meters over an elapsed time of 7, what would that have been? Roughly about 7.4 seconds, I think. So we come over here, here's that, and that's going to get us up to about 80 meters, which is up here. And here's the intercept of those points, and there we go. So the trend is, the longer you're in the air, the higher you're going to go. Now, you might have some outliers. Outliers are points that don't belong, like a point like that, for example, or a point like that. They're way off, but you're focusing on the general trend of data. So if we forget these outliers here and we focus on the general trend of data, your line of best fit after you've put all the points for your class is going to illustrate the general trend. The general trend is that you're going up at some sort of slope like this. Notice, the line of best fit does not need to start at the origin. It can start floating in the middle of the graph, and it just needs to show the general trend you're going. Notice that sometimes you could hit the majority of points on your slope, and sometimes your line of best fit could hit none of them. The big picture is it's showing the average trend. So as time goes up, your altitude goes up. It should be a positive correlation no matter what data you have for this project, because if we look at all of your class data, you're going to see this trend. Okay? So just make sure that whatever your dots indicate on your graph, that the line is also going to follow that general trend. And then that's how you do a scatter plot. Again, you can paste this in your Google Doc today. If you are having technical difficulties on that, I can help you paste it in your doc on Monday, but at least get this graph done. So today, what do you need to have done? You need to have done the bar graph. That's your first thing. Then the pie chart. The instructions are on Canvas. I'll allude to those shortly. And then finally, you do the scatter plot, which is what we just did. Don't forget to do the line of best fit, okay? Now, about that pie chart, where's that at? So if I go to Canvas, hit the home page, your instructions for the pie chart are located right here, okay? You click on that, and it's going to give you explicit, step-by-step instructions, if it ever downloads properly, of how to do that in the Pages app. So you're going to need to make sure that you do the Pages app first. It should look like a yellow icon with a little pencil hitting the bottom of the icon at an angle. That's what Pages looks like. And you just follow these step-by-step instructions, and it's going to be super easy. So that's your 3 graphs for today, and that's all you got to do for class. Email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I'll see you on Monday. Have a great weekend.